You're listening to the Chapter a Day Bible Study. I'm John Stange, and today we're in Genesis 45. Joseph reveals his identity. Genesis 45 is a chapter that helps you really feel the weight of grace. The story told in these verses reaches a climax that's been building for years. Joseph, who was betrayed and sold and forgotten and mistreated, he stands face to face with the very brothers who caused his suffering. What happens next isn't fueled by revenge or resentment. Instead, we see something that can only come from a heart that's been shaped by God. We watch Joseph choose forgiveness, compassion, and reconciliation. As we walk through the chapter, we also start to see the shape of another story, a far greater one, because Genesis 45 points our eyes straight toward Jesus. The chapter begins with an emotional breaking point. Joseph can't keep his identity hidden any longer. Genesis 45:1 says, "Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him." He sends everyone else out of the room and begins to weep so loudly that the Egyptians hear it from outside. When Joseph reveals the truth by saying in verse 3, "I am Joseph," his brothers are understandably terrified. They're face to face with the one they wronged, and now he's one of the most powerful men in the world. It's not surprising that they can't even respond because they expect judgment. But Joseph's next words dissolve their fear. He says in verse 5, "And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life." Joseph isn't denying their sin. He isn't pretending their betrayal didn't hurt. He simply sees the story from a bigger perspective. He recognizes that God was at work in ways none of them could have understood at the time. Imagine how his brothers felt hearing those words. They had carried guilt for 2 decades. They had replayed their choices in their minds and lived with the consequences. And yet Joseph looks at them with compassion. He's saying, in a sense, God has been writing something bigger than our pain. This is grace that breaks chains of shame. Joseph explains that the famine still has years left, and God placed him in Egypt so he could save countless lives, including his own family. He says in verse 8, "So it was not you who sent me here, but God." This, again, doesn't excuse their sin, but it shows that God can redeem any situation. What others intend for harm, God can transform for good. Joseph has learned to trust God's plan, even when he didn't understand it. After revealing his identity, Joseph embraces each of his brothers. The barrier that once defined their relationship is replaced by genuine affection. Reconciliation sweeps through the room. The same men who once threw him into a pit are now welcomed with open arms. This is what grace looks like in real time. This is what forgiveness looks like even when the wounds run deep. Pharaoh hears about Joseph's family and responds with generosity. He tells Joseph to bring his father and the whole household to Egypt, promising to provide for them and give them the best the land has to offer. Joseph sends his brothers home with food, gifts, and wagons to bring their father back. As they prepare to leave, Joseph gives them one final instruction. In Genesis 45:24, he says, "Do not quarrel on the way." It's as if Joseph knows the temptation they'll face. Old patterns might try to rise again, but Joseph wants them to travel home in peace. When the brothers reach Jacob and tell him Joseph is alive, Jacob's heart nearly stops. He can't believe it at first. But when he sees the wagons and hears their full report, his spirit revives. Verse 28 captures his renewed hope as he says this, "It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Jacob's sorrow, which began many years earlier, it's washed away by joy, a joy he never expected to feel again. Genesis 45 isn't just a story about family reconciliation. It's a preview of the kind of salvation Jesus brings. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, but God used that betrayal to save the very people who hurt him. Well, in the same way, Jesus was rejected, mocked, and crucified, and yet God used his suffering to rescue us. Joseph offered forgiveness before it was requested, and Jesus offers forgiveness before we even know how much we need it. Joseph provided bread during a famine, and Jesus calls himself the bread of life, who satisfies eternally. Joseph's words, "God sent me before you to preserve life," those words gently reflect a greater truth about Jesus, who was sent by the Father to give eternal life. The compassion Joseph shows his brothers reminds us of the heart of Christ. The reconciliation Joseph offers, it mirrors the reconciliation Jesus brings between us and God. The revival of Jacob's spirit, that foreshadows the joy believers experience when they discover that hope isn't lost and salvation is real. As you reflect on Genesis 45 today, let its message settle into your heart. Maybe you're carrying guilt from the past, and you wonder if forgiveness is even possible. Maybe you're walking through something that doesn't make sense yet. Or maybe you've struggled to see how God could bring anything good from pain. Joseph's story invites you to trust that God is at work behind the scenes. It reminds you that grace runs deeper than failure, and it shows you that God's plans stretch far beyond what you can see in the moment. Most of all, this chapter invites you to see Jesus more clearly, the one who was rejected and yet saves, the one who forgives, restores, and welcomes, the one who turns sorrow into joy and brokenness into hope. Thanks again for listening to today's episode of the Chapter a Day Bible Study. For more resources to help you in your walk with Christ and your understanding of the Bible, please visit my website at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com. And if you'd like to partner with me by becoming a supporter of this ministry, you'll see a few options to do so, again, at BibleStudyHeadquarters.com or in the description of this episode. As always, thank you for your prayers, thank you for your support, and thank you for your willingness to share this content with others. Have a great day, and I'll see you again right here tomorrow.